Well, welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. So what is the healthiest habit you can commit to this year in 2021? Now, I know we're halfway through it, but there is something that you might want to think about called self-nourishment. No, it's not being selfish. It's self-care. It's self-awareness so that you can have better health and better energy for those who need you. And I'm not even talking about food here when I say nourishment. What my guest and I will be discussing today involves just a few minutes of your day and a pen. Okay, so Stephen Lawson is the founder of this amazing tool that I've discovered called the Monk Manual. And many of us are going to relate to his story here after spending a decade pushing himself to every limit in the workforce, along with his colleagues and friends. He slowed down. He looked around and he realized something was wrong. The ways of the modern productivity are making people sick, and I agree. Determined to find a way of life that accounts for the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, Stephen began a soulful journey that has led him to develop the Monk Manual, which I will let him fill you in on today, why exactly he calls it the Monk Manual. So Stephen, welcome to the podcast, and let's begin at the beginning. I would love to hear your thoughts on just how our modern productivity is making people sick.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a roundabout. Well, first of all, I should say thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited for the
Absolutely.
conversation. One of the things that actually, I wasn't even aware of this when I created the Monk Manual. This is something that just has come to me really in the last few months, is when you study, when you look, Google has this really interesting tool where you can actually go and look up what the usage of certain words are throughout time, throughout history. And you see kind of the prevalence of the word productivity. When it starts spiking in usage is right around the same time as the Industrial Revolution. And then it stays as a pretty prevalent term, drops down a bit during World War I and World War II, and then skyrockets back up really around like 1980, 1990. So we see that where a lot of productivity kind of became this bigger thing again, 80s and 90s, and we're kind of still living on that, the crust of that wave. But what's really interesting is productivity actually comes from traditionally the agricultural world. It comes from the same root word that produce does, right? So you can think of it as something tied more to kind of a natural, holistic approach to life. And it was so helpful for me to discover that because it makes a lot of sense in that a lot of times when we look at productivity today, we're in a sense turning ourselves into commodities, looking at our own lives in terms of maybe an efficiency machine of how do we go and get more widgets done and move all these things along. But the problem is we're not robots, we're not machines, and that's why we have, I think, so much unrest and oftentimes productivity, which I think when we're honest with ourselves, often the root of our desire for being more productive is to find a sense of peace, whether that's financial peace or peace in a relationship or at work or this or that. But it often actually has the opposite effect of taking away our peace, of taking away our sense of being in the present moment. And what makes so much more sense is this image of productivity is not so much this efficiency assembly line model, but one of cultivation, one of kind of harvesting and taking that which is kind of organically already happening and in leaning into kind of the creative potential that exists in every person's life. So that's a roundabout way to answer that question. But I really think that what you end up finding is that so much of our modern culture, which in some ways productivity is actually, it's a really interesting kind of focused sliver of a greater whole, right? Like you see that kind of slash and burn model throughout a lot of the culture, but specifically in productivity, you can really see it clearly where it's not really engineered to steward the person or a person's life necessarily so much as it is to produce in a very narrow way.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that you mentioned how people are seeking peace, because I just had this conversation with a client who said, I'm coming to you because my diet's not working out, but I'm just looking for peace and rest. I am so stressed. I'm so anxious. My life is in turmoil. And it's like a resounding, reverberation we hear from all these different people, and people are talking about it with their friends at a coffee shop. You'll hear them say, I'm just so stressed out. There's so much going on. I'm so busy. I'm busy. And I get sick of the word busy. I won't even use it. I try to use the word productive because I want to produce good quality things. But This is like you said, this is the mainstream of what we're living in. This modern productivity has put so much pressure on us as humans. Social media tells you, you don't look like your friend, you don't do what they're doing, they're doing this with their job, shouldn't you be doing that with your job? We didn't have that 20 years ago. We didn't know what everybody was doing unless we asked them. We didn't have the constant feed showing us how we're not measuring up.
Yeah.
Television commercials tell a vision of what you should own, so they're telling you, you don't measure up, you don't own this car, and other marketing platforms are creating more stress and more pressure on us than ever before. So where does one begin to slow down and reflect as you did in the workforce?
Yeah, a great question. So one of the things to maybe first highlight is I do think slowing down reflection is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is some of the things that you were just highlighting, we aren't naturally aware of the things that are just going, right? It's like if you're driving very fast on the highway, the faster you go, the less likely you are to notice the signs, the more likely you are to miss turns, the more likely you are to get in a car accident, right? We know this because that's why we don't drive 130 on the highway, right?
Right.
But we've gotten used to kind of a brace neck speed of life. And so the first thing is to, I think, pause and say, to ask honestly, is there enough space in my own life for silence and reflection to be able to actually kind of hear what's really going on in my life, right? Like what's going on in what are the things I actually desire? What are the things that life might be teaching me right now? Because those lessons otherwise are just going to pass us by. The other piece is, I do think that one of the things that kind of compels us, and it is almost like a compulsion. There's almost a I think that there's a natural desire we all have to reach our full potential. That's well and good. That is part of, I think, living a full life, is to be able to say, there were challenges. I worked through those challenges. I was generous with the people around me. I loved well and was loved well, right? Mm-hmm. But there is also the darker side of that is when we feel a certain compulsion to do something. And I think that oftentimes when you're in a scenario where you feel out of control, you can feel like you have to do something, like you're compelled to go and kind of race and go through the maze to get like the piece of cheese or whatever it is. And I do think that that's a real thing. I don't want to underplay the fact that when you're working in a business, or you're growing your own business, or really in any arena of life, our natural response is when we see a problem or we see something we want to attain, we think, okay, I need to work really hard and work really fast to get there. Mm-hmm. When sometimes I'm a very big believer of the measure twice, cut once concept. This idea that oftentimes it's counterintuitive, and it takes some level of trust, I guess. Mm-hmm. But to be able to, when you can step back and be more intentional, you actually eliminate a lot of the busy work and a lot of the misdirected action that you might be undertaking. Because productivity, as we understand it, we're kind of conditioned to understand it this way, is, at least for me, I can say, often I had thought productivity is doing more, whereas now I actually think of productivity as doing less. It's just doing the most important things well. Yeah. And so sometimes actually the fact that you're very busy is not a sign that you're productive. It's actually the opposite.
Correct. Yeah, because busy, you can fill your day with all kinds of meaningless tasks that don't really bring meaning to your day. They don't really bring forming good habits. They don't really bring a reflective time, like you said. I love that you mentioned we need to carve out that time to slow down and reflect. How many people do that? Like, how many of us are cramming everything into one day only to crash into bed at night and repeat the same thing again the next day? Let me cram as much into one day. Versus I did that for a long time and it just got me really sick. So I understand where you're coming from when you say you stop and you take a look around and you go, what am I doing? Like, do I need to work this hard? Do I need to put out this many irons into my fire? Or could I just pick like the 4 irons that really matter the most to me and be able to put a lot of energy into those, and then have nothing at this one part of my day where I can just sit and watch the clouds go by, or sit and read a book to my daughter, or, lay on the grass and watch a little centipede go by. Like, we don't do that anymore. And I keep hearing people say, well, time seems like there's less time. It seems like there's less time in the world now. I don't have as much time. And I interviewed a doctor, Jack Cruz, a long time ago, and he had said that in the future, time will speed up. And I never understood what that meant, but now I'm seeing it. It's because we're filling our day with so much of this, I have to, which really do you. And then also we're filling our days and we're making time speed up, but you can slow time down. You can slow down and schedule only a few things in your day and make that space for meaningful insight and for habit forming and for just grounding yourself, earthing yourself. So, thinking or talking to somebody who has felt the same way I have, like, you've probably felt those symptoms of when your life was chaotic and out of control. Let's talk about some of those. Like, what were some of the symptoms that you noticed that maybe somebody listening is going to go, I'm feeling that way. Like, should I slow down? Maybe I do need to rethink how much energy I'm putting into this 60-hour-a-week job, or this relationship that's harming my family, or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely. I've never worked on Wall Street. I just have the image of Wall Street that's in my head from movies and things like that.
Right.
But there were periods in my life where, I was running from place to place. Sometimes actually literally, like I'd be running from a meeting to another meeting, right? Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. It's something a little, I don't want to say it's silly, but I can look at myself in that time and say, at least it was a bit misdirected. And in terms of the symptoms, one symptom is I do think time feels like it's moving very fast, because you're not really present through any of it, right? The thing is when you're actually, if you think of kind of our brains as having kind of an area of focus, I think sometimes people spend more energy thinking backwards, some people maybe more forwards, and then there's the present as well. For myself at that time, a lot of my mental energy, a lot of my time was spent thinking about future outcomes, and in some ways even trying to control future outcomes. And so what was happening is I wasn't really there and being present, right? It's like, for example, my son's playing soccer, and I was at the game yesterday. And if you've ever been in a scenario, it doesn't have to be a kid's sports game. It could be anything. But, there's an hour-long game. And if I'm there and I'm just kind of watching and that's all I'm doing, it feels like an hour. If I'm there and I'm thinking about a bunch of other stuff, and I'm on my phone and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, well, at the end of that hour, I'm going to look back and say, like, where'd that whole thing go, right? And so we do know this intuitively because we experience it. And I think that when we're very busy, time does move faster because we're not actually there. Ultimately, we're kind of just doing, we're not really being. The other side of that, and I think this is probably a very common feeling that people have, and I certainly did, is not only are you feeling like time's moving fast, but at the end of the day, you feel very tired. This is what you feel like. You feel like, I'm really behind. I don't know what I got done. Like, I don't really know what happened today. But I know I'm really tired. I know that I feel like I gave so much today. I don't really feel like I necessarily even focus on the things that are important to me. But I also know, like, it's not like I was on vacation because I'm really tired, and tomorrow I've got to do it all over again. So that's I would say that's probably the most kind of signature symptom of that. But it's not always that. It's not always that pointed. Sometimes all we feel is just a general malaise towards life, right? We just feel kind of like we're stuck. We're going through the same. I'm a big believer actually in, like, the Mary Poppins quote, which I don't bring this up that often, but it's, for every job to be done, there's an element of fun. You find the fun and snap the job.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
And so I'm a big believer that even if your life is somewhat like not monotonous, routine, I should say, right? Like for my wife, she stays home, and we have 3 young kids, and she has a lot more routine, like regular things that happen every single day. But even in the midst of that, there is like an opportunity. There's something like very there's a potential in that for something, for meaning, for the ability to enjoy, to kind of savor these different moments.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably also when you know you've kind of leaned a little bit too much in the doing direction, is when life isn't actually enjoyable, or you don't feel like you're enjoying it. Specifically, if when you look at it objectively, you should be, right? Like if you're on vacation, you have a hard time enjoying it because you're just trying to kind of come down off the doing high, the productivity high that you've been on. Then probably something needs to be looked at, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll add to that, because those are all things I've heard from people talk about, but I'll add the physical aspect of, you mentioned fatigue. What I hear is gut health. So I have a theory that when people are backed up and, like you said, stuck in their life, or it's just like too much routine, too much go, 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 and it's the same thing every day, I find that those individuals are very constipated. So they get backed up. They're not letting go of the trash in their life. They're holding on to these things that really don't serve them. And so they're going to experience that. Also, then you'll have the people that aren't really structured. They don't have the wherewithal to understand that life doesn't have to be chaos every day. So these are the people that have IBS. They'll be, one day they're constipated, next day they're diarrhea every 5 minutes, and it's like their life is chaos, their gut is chaos. So it's like there's manifestation of issues in your body too. In fact, liver stagnation is due to a lot of people being stuck. Like when your liver's not producing bile and stuff like that, it'll manifest in your liver as that, but in your life, it could be a metaphor for being stuck. So it's like, you got to move out of this box that you've created for yourself of like, I have to be all things to everyone, and I have to get all of these things done. When, I'll use the analogy of my friend, Tammy, that died years ago, and she never kept her house. Her house was always in disarray. It was a mess. But Tammy spent time with her kids every day. Like, her kids were the most important thing. Now, after she died, I went to their house and it was a wreck, and they had people coming for the funeral and stuff. And I asked her husband, can I clean for you? Like, just pick everything up for all the company that's coming. He's like, no, Tammy never cleaned. That wasn't important to her. She would have much rather had a dirty house and spent time with those she loved. It's not important. And I'm like, you're right. Like, if we clean our house on a Sunday, and then Sunday night we're hit by a tornado and the house blows away, does it really matter? Like, could we have done something more that day with our family, our loved ones, or our time for reflection than just cleaning our house? So it just makes you stop and think. And also, I'll add to your Mary Poppins quote, because I love that. Audrey Hepburn had a quote that said, every day should be filled with something exquisite. Like it doesn't have to be an exquisite day, but there should be some part in the day, which I call vitamin P, pleasure, passion, purpose, where it's your vitamin you can't get in the store. Like, you have to create it. You have to draw out time for that, and you have to make it happen in your life. What's your purpose? What's your pleasure? What's your passion? And I think when you ask a lot of people this, they don't know. They're like, well, I have to think about that. Well, we shouldn't have to think about it. You should be living out your purpose. And so that brings me to the point in the monk manual where you address purposeful doing. Can you talk about purposeful doing?
Yeah. So our lives in a lot of ways are made up of action. I don't want to get too abstract with this, but
Sure.
kind of our experience of life is one of action, right? It's one of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of the differences, I think, between the people who experience a high level of fulfillment and well-being are those who take purposeful action versus non-purposeful action. So there's two layers to that. One layer is if we're not taking purposeful action, we're taking action that is not necessarily aligned with our own best interest, right? Mm-hmm. So I might go and want to go have a double cheeseburger from McDonald's, but if I'm not necessarily anchoring that with the deeper purpose of my life or the deeper purposes I have around certain goals, it's not truly going to serve me. The other piece is our action. It's through the things that we do that we often will arrive at some level of meaning, right? It's the investments it's the investments in relationships we have. It's the projects we undertake. It's even the little things, right? Of how can we inject some level of meaning or purpose into these little actions, right? So I'm a big believer that we in the modern world, we are very aware of a number of different problems that take place. There's a lot of poverty around the world. There's a lot of hunger. There's a lot of needs that aren't being met or don't seem to be met for people. What we're not often as aware of is that as human beings, we need meaning. Like we have to have meaning in our lives. We have to be able to see that what we're doing has a purpose. Otherwise, we fall into despair, and we fall into feeling kind of stuck, and kind of the light from our life just fades away, because it's why would it even really matter? But the flip side of that is when someone has meaning, that's the person who's inspired. And the person who's inspired, who has a passion, like, for example, you clearly have a passion about the things that you cover in these podcasts. That inspiration not only fuels you, but it also then has a trickle down effect to the people around you. And it's this virtuous cycle where, to the degree that you're able to kind of like take purposeful action, it benefits other people. And then it kind of furthers your ability to impact more people and to experience greater and greater meaning. And there is this virtuous cycle. I do think that most things in our life, although we'd love to kind of just flip a switch, and if we're in kind of a bad spot, it's good. Or if we're in a good spot, it's 10 times better. Often it's iterative. Like every day we're just kind of climbing this spiral staircase or descending, right? And it compounds. A lot of the things we do compound. So
yeah, no, that's so true, because that's productivity. Like putting meaning behind your purpose and doing that purposeful doing, that to me is productivity, because then you're producing things that at the end of your life, people are going to go, oh man, he had such a passion. He was so inspired, that's going to inspire them. Not, oh, wow, he was a hard worker. He worked 60 hours a week and he was really good at playing on his phone. They're not going to remember that. Hopefully they're going to see somebody who's passionate, and all of us could be more passionate about our life. We could be more purposeful in doing, and not spend, what aggravates me is not spend so much time numbing out to a device or to a feed. That, because people tell me, oh, I don't have time to do, meditation or whatever. Like, if you stop playing on your feed, that's probably a good 5 minutes right there. You could sit down and journal or meditate or pray, And so, now we go into this tool, this monk manual. Why the monk manual? Why do you call it that? Like, how is this going to serve what we've been talking about?
Yeah. So on a few levels, what really led up to it was I was experiencing this kind of burnout, productivity burnout, I guess you could say. But it wasn't just a burnout, because it wasn't just emotional. It was also kind of an intellectual waking up to seeing this is just not working. Like, in a lot of ways I've been lied to. Like, in a lot of ways, the things that they say, this is what you should do, it doesn't actually work, right? Absolutely. Or serve us truly. And as I was studying, I've been fairly interested in living I guess my potential or a fuller life for a fairly long time. And I had been reading some psychology and some spiritual works, and then also some, and then all the works I'd read in the productivity genre. And I was seeing how there was almost like a Venn diagram where they all agreed on some core ways of approaching life that would lead to the flourishing of a human being. And what struck me is that that approach to life actually seemed to be more predominantly lived out amongst spiritual masters and best practices in productivity and psychology of kind of the well-being of a human person, all agreed on some core ways of relating to the world, or some core ideas using different language, but kind of like a formula of sorts. And that it actually seemed to be most profoundly lived out in monks, which is such a different approach to things, right? It almost seems alien. Like I know people personally who it doesn't seem to make sense. Why would someone live that way? And I have a theory that if you think of kind of the natural way that human beings have lived throughout history, maybe think of it as like a spectrum. We might look at the monks as being kind of over here on one far end of the spectrum. But I really do believe we're on the other far end of the spectrum, right? where the things we believe are normal are really not normal.
Mm.
And what's interesting is even when you think about it, if you were born 200 years ago, you'd have more in common from a lifestyle standpoint with a monk than you do with yourself now, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were living on farms. They didn't have around the clock access to information. They didn't have phones dinging and doing all these things. They were kind of living a more monk type life just naturally, right? And we've moved kind of away from that. But that doesn't mean it's natural, right? Just because it's kind of the way we're living doesn't mean that it makes sense for us to live that way. And I think what attracts me to monks is it's fairly radical, right? And it challenges a lot of our preconceived notions around what's important, around what life can look like, around what fulfillment can even look like. And I think there's power to that, especially when you end up finding a group of people who seem to be living a life of deeper joy and peace. I think it's worth paying attention to them.
Absolutely. I mean, thinking about the way they live their life, it almost makes you jealous. Like they don't have all of the interruptions. They don't have all the notifications. They take time to reflect every day. So I can see where you're coming from with that. So the monk manual looks like this. It's actually one of my favorite parts of it is how beautiful it is. Like you can carry this around and it's just this beautiful book. But it's not really a book. What is it? It's a day planner and a journal. So tell us about how it works. And specifically, utilizing the pages, the questions, the reflective spaces, so like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I was hoping to accomplish with the monk manual was to take the system of life that is in a monastery and poured it over to people living in the world, right? Yeah. So the thing is it's natural, I think, to look at a monk and the way they live and to say, you know what, like that's all well and great for them. They can go and not have a mortgage and they live in like it makes sense, right? They have all these. We look at kind of the exterior of their life and think, well, that's so different. I can never experience anything like that. There's some truth to that, but I think that that goes further than is a fair assessment, because I think that if you think of, for example, a high chair versus a dinner chair versus a beanbag chair, the form is all very different. So the beanbag chair and the high chair don't even look the same, right? But the function's the same, right? It's to sit on. So what I was hoping to do is to say, okay, if you take the function of monasticism and port it over to people who are living in the world, knowing that monks are experiencing all these things, what would that look like? And so what I was thinking is that a lot of what's in a monastery is certain daily, weekly, monthly sort of practices. There's a rhythm to things. And then there's also order, right? So one of the benefits of order, okay, when you think of, for example, if a monk might be from 10 to 11 having lunch, and then 11 to 12 in manual labor or teaching, or maybe 12 to 1 in meditation, and that might actually seem to us fairly rigid, and it is rigid, right? But the benefit of that level of clarity is that they don't have to be thinking about what am I going to do? What should I be doing right now? They already know what they should be doing right now. So what they can do is just show up and be fully there, right? They can know. I mean, a benefit of recording this conversation right now is, I'm fully here
Mhm.
because it's on my schedule, and I know that this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not thinking about the this or that. I mean, I'm thinking
Mhm.
about my daughter that I can hear upstairs, but beyond that, I'm here, right? And that's one of the things that they experience, which I think is really beautiful, is this freedom to actually be present. Whereas the converse reality for us is often we're not, like as I was saying earlier, we're often not very aware, or we're often not really in the present moment because we're
Mhm.
100 other places, which not only impacts our peace, but it also, we never are really performing at our best when we're in that space. I do like to think of our brains kind of almost like you can think of a computer, right? Where
Mhm.
if you open up 100 different apps, like that thing's going to go relatively slow, right? There's going to be lag times. You're not going to necessarily, and I think the same thing happens for us. But when we can just monotask or just focus on the task at hand, it really helps. And so the monk manual system is really it's a series of different practices, and there's a heavy reflective component, because one part of it is what I call the PAR method, which is this preparation, action, reflection,
Yeah.
which is trying to drive at that same level of intentionality, because we can't live these rigid schedules when we're in the world. There's too much in flux. Our days change, especially if you have kids or people who are dependent on you. Like we can't. We have to kind of ebb and flow a bit, right?
Mhm.
But I think that through preparation, action, reflection, we not only are able to prepare to say upfront, these are the things that are most important. We can then live into them in a fairly peaceful way because we've already worked out what's the most important things for us to do. But then
Mhm.
we can also reflect back, and we can learn the lessons of life that are in front of us, right? Like, when were we feeling unrest? Like, when were we at our best? Um, Things of that nature. And then the other aspect of that, and there's a lot that we could discuss here, but I've also tried to do somewhat of like a trickle down effect, where you take the month and you lay out, okay, these are the core priorities for the month, right? So here's the things that if I only got 5 things done this month, these would be
Yeah.
the most important things.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you plan your weeks tethered back to that. So you're
Mm.
not deciding, your days aren't just whatever is the most urgent thing, because we're naturally attracted to the urgent over the important. The urgent usually has a lot more energy around it.
Yeah.
The important things rarely ever feel urgent. So this kind of anchors us in the most important things, and our weeks are informed by our months, and our days are informed by our weeks. And so it becomes um, this system where you can be really intentional and then live into it. So have like a certain level of peace. You don't have to go to bed at the end of the day and say, I don't know what I spent my day on, because you actually know,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm. No, I completely agree. When you said the word order, to me, that was what, so this thing came to me, I got an email talking about the monk manual, and I'm like, this like came at the perfect time, because I'm coming off the tail end of my mold protocol, and I'm ready to like reorganize my life. So I'm not living with all these supplements and these treatments and things like that to get myself, I'm like in a good space where I can like put order back in my life of, okay, now I can live again. My body's back to where it was. Like I'm starting to feel normal again. So it came at the perfect time, and order is exactly what it was. I have the Vata in Ayurveda. It's the wind, the ether, you're always on the go. You're always thinking, even if you stop and slow down. And like, I love to sit outside and just watch the clouds go by, but my mind's always racing. Like I'm always thinking creative thoughts. And I needed a place to put all those down in order as they come, so that they're not ruminating in my brain. So that's
Mhm,
what the monk manual did for me. I was able to have a to-do list, for that
mhm,
day. But I was also able to stop and go, okay, what am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to this. Okay,
mhm,
what habits am I working on right now? How did I do with that today? Did I do well? Or at the start of the day, if I started, I'm like, how am I going to implement my habit that I want to
mhm,
start today? And then what was my meaningful moment, maybe with my daughter or with a client or with nature. So that was so interesting to me, because it was something that organized and put order into my thoughts. So it wasn't just what do I have to do with my job today, but also how am I working on my personal growth and my relationship growth and stuff like that. So um, talk to me about 3 days, because the way you've outlined the pages, there's 3 days at a time. And what I found that I liked about that is the spots are small to enter things. like a sentence or a phrase or a word. You don't have to do this big long journaling, because again, we're dealing with people that don't have a lot of time. So that's another feature I loved, is that you put it in a 3-day setting, which to me meant I don't have to journal every day, but I can look at this list that I have for 3 days and go, if I could get these done, like you said, within these 3 days or within the week, I'll feel really good about that. And also, if I can take time to reflect and find that personal relationship I'm working on to grow a little bit, then I can look back and be thankful for that. So talk to me about how you came up with 3 days.
Well, one of the things from a priority standpoint is, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's similar to even thinking about like responsibility, right? If you're working on a team or a project or a committee and everyone's responsible for something, really no one's responsible for it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
part of the process is trying to focus and intentionally help people to say no, say yes to the things that are important and no to the things that aren't important, to create boundaries of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And so the priority, when you're looking at the week, a lot of it is trying to kind of chunk in these most important aspects, and also tethering into that the personal growth component, but not only the personal growth component, also a relational component. Because one of the things that we know from just research around well-being and meaning for people is, and even happiness, is that often a lot of our happiness and sense of fulfillment is tied not to turning inwards on ourselves. And I'm not talking about taking care of ourselves, but when you tend to turn really inwards, that often doesn't lead to feelings of deep satisfaction or meaning. It's through connection. It's through turning outwards. It's through kind of recognizing the gift maybe that your life is, and then giving that gift away. And so one of the things that is important, not only because it's certainly part of the tradition of monasticism in both the East and the West, but also because there's a danger when people come to planners or productivity tools that it becomes, how do I focus on my own stuff? How do I make sure I get my stuff done, even if that means that I'm ignoring this person or I'm ignoring this other responsibility or whatever it is. So I really wanted to tether it to a way of relating to the world that was directed outwards rather than inwards.
Oh, you did a great job with it, because the one thing I've found using mine is that instead of like focusing on where can I improve, what can I do, I've found myself writing so much about, how are you treating your daughter? Are you treating her with the same respect you show other people? How is she learning respect? Do you talk to her with respect? Are you being kind to her when you ask her to be kind? Are you too critical of her? So I'm it's self-reflection, but it's aimed at helping another human. And so that's what I found, is it's like, it doesn't become this me journal. It actually becomes, how can I serve? How may I serve? Like, how can I get better so that I have the energy to serve those around me? So I thought that relationship piece was really beautiful. And the other part I loved is, because I am a spiritual seeker, if you will, is the fact that you have in there the one thing God is teaching me, which is beautiful. Like, it doesn't matter what genre of the universe you're in. If you think about it in terms of, we have a creator, and that creator's trying to teach us things, maybe not even trying, maybe just allowing things to happen. But we have to be present. We have to be aware. We have to be looking for what that lesson is. And that makes you better. It's kind of like good counsel. If somebody counsels you and says, you're doing this good, but you really have to work on this. And that's how I feel the creator does for us. It's like, if we make that space and we ask, we pray, show me where I can improve, we're definitely going to get an answer. But you might also get some counsel like, well, this is good, but this is where you're lacking, so we have to be open to that counsel and take it internally and turn it into good, rather than be defensive about it, So I love that section on one thing God is teaching you. So what brought you to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually, we could probably spend an entire hour on that
I know.
component. There's, I'll highlight a couple of things.
Okay.
One is we serve a very diverse audience. So by that I mean we have people from really all spiritual backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
We even have a fair number of agnostics who use it, right? And it does use the word God. So that's probably something that they have to navigate. But that's part of the intention behind the prompt. So it's hard to grow up in the West without having an image attached to the word God, right?
Yeah.
All of our words, we have images, right? If I was to say right now, white dog, there's an image in everyone's mind that comes up of that, right? We all have an image around God,
Mm-hmm.
and it's consequential. Even if someone says, I don't believe in God, there's something that's an image in their mind that they're not believing in.
That's
And
right.
that image is psychologically, I think, very powerful, right? So just on a psychological level, I think it's an important thing to engage, because if people have a very negative image attached to the word God, that does, for most of us, that word is often tied to kind of this ultimate reality, this ultimate being. And if it's a negative connotation, that means that the ultimate reality is also negative. But teachers, a teacher is someone who wills your good, right? A teacher is someone who, like, someone doesn't teach when they don't care, or when they're not working towards someone's good. And so my hope was that in that prompt, on one level, it could help people, in a sense, like heal whatever image that they might have that is not actively serving them. Another level of it is, I do believe that there is lessons that are being taught to us all the time. And I do believe that there's a process to our lives. And I like to think of life even as a process, because a process isn't something that, I was once in a meeting. It was a strategic, like visioning meeting. And I remember the guy who was facilitating it, he said, I'm going to go and run through this, but like, I just asked that you trust the process, right? Because if we weren't going to trust the process, maybe we wouldn't really fully engage. Maybe on another level, we'd be questioning the whole time, well, is this the right way to do it, or is this not, or whatever. And some of this is personal belief, but I could also, I think, convince a lot of people. I really do think that there's a process to our life, and it's not something that then becomes something we have to control. It's something that we engage. It's something that we try to pay attention to. It's something that we try to respond to, that we rise up to, whatever the challenges are that are in front of us at a given time, whatever the opportunities are. But to know that, like, the things that we're dealing with are the things that we're meant to be dealing with at a particular time, and that they can be used for good, right? That everything can work towards our good. I think that is the belief I subscribe to. And it also just makes a lot of sense to me. It's been my experience, right? There's a writer by the name of Kurt Vonnegut, and he has this wonderful quote that's, the thing about human beings is that, I'm paraphrasing, but it's the thing about human beings is we have a really hard time telling what the good news and the bad news is, right? And that is the case, right? Like, oftentimes we'll be in something and be like, this is really bad. And we end up finding later that it was actually really good, or we were being prepared for something even better, right? Or we were developing the character necessary to be able to take on the life task in our purpose that we wouldn't have been able to take on otherwise, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think that is, it does take slowing down, though, and asking that question on a repeated basis of what we're being taught.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just got a mental image of my brother who was recently in a car accident, and he tore a muscle, and it actually is a really bad tear to where he's going to need surgery. So he's been kind of bummed about it. And it's easy to look at the negative, like, I got so much recovery, I got to go through this surgery. I've never had a surgery before. But on the flip side, I was talking to him, I'm like, this, as a nutritionist, you are going to be a better coach now. You're going to go through this, and you're going to be able to help your clients deal better with their post-surgery recovery. You're going to learn things through it. it's going to be this cool experience where someday you're going to have this scar and somebody's going to ask you and you're going to be like, oh yeah, this is what happened, you know? And if we think about all the people we've met along the way that have had that, and they're able to share this story that happened to them, like, it's no big deal. They talk about it like, yeah, it kind of made me who I was. I learned a lot through it and stuff like that. So if we reframe the things we're dealing with, the challenges in life, and we use something like this monk manual to go, all right, this is bothering me. This is a challenge in my life right now, but how can I write down things that might be showing up for me that are teaching me something about myself, you know, or something about how I'm serving others around me, or what I can learn through this and what's God teaching me, you know? So I love that, speaking to the negative and reframing it in the positive. And I think this manual will speak to a lot of people like myself who have had body dysmorphia. So I was thinking about it this morning, actually, when I was journaling. I was like, there's a lot in here about, you know, trying to get my body right, trying to get my health on track, trying to focus on the next thing that's going to get me to the next level. You know, as health optimizers, in the span of people that are listening right now, we're always trying to like get the next biohack or tweak our system even more so we can get more results, you know, more and more and more. But even that is a stressor. So it's like, how can I stop thinking about what my body's doing and start thinking about more what my life is doing? You know, so reframe the negative self-talk. And this manual really allows you to do that. It allows you to reframe that negative self-talk, because all of it is positive. My 3 biggest accomplishments in 3 days, you know, 3 things I'm looking forward to, my meaningful moment. I mean, you can't write down, well, I hated everything in there, because that's not meaningful. You have to search and dig and go, well, I guess somebody, you know, brought me cookies at the office. That was kind of nice. I'll write that down. Maybe that was the only good thing that happened. But it allows you to reflect and find the good versus so much bad in the world. You know, there's so much negativity with what we deal with right now. So I just think this is essential for anybody that's looking to improve their health, that they embrace this monk manual and make it their own. So we'll wrap up, but no, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just share one last thing.
Yeah.
I view, on some level, you could argue that the monk manual is it's kind of self-stewardship. It is maybe helping people with productivity. There is all these, I guess, pragmatic things that it'll help up an individual with. But I think what's actually most helpful is to see it even as like a self-care tool. Because, you know, I believe that, in a sense, like, we're all just taller children, right? We're all just little kids, like, on the inside, that have gotten hurt in different ways and had great experiences in other ways, and are just trying to do our best and work it out. And especially when what I find with my audience, a lot of the people who use the monk manual are relatively high achievers, not necessarily in like a career standpoint, but they're taking life fairly seriously. They're trying to do the right things. They're trying to be intentional. They're really trying to go after it. And those people also sometimes, those same people sometimes can have kind of perfectionist streaks, and can sometimes even fall into a level of being like really hard and really critical on themselves. And I think that having a regular practice that encourages a certain level of honesty and a certain level of gratitude and turns us towards others and meaning, it over time, it actually frees a lot of people from the voice in their head that I think is very, very critical. And I don't know if everyone experiences that voice, but I know for myself, I've had that voice in my head at times, and it's like a manager or a boss or a parent, that if I heard that person, like if I was at a grocery store and I heard that person talk to another person, I'd say, you need to call like Child Protective Services. That person treats that person terribly. And yet that's how, and it's kind of like learning to nurture oneself and to treat oneself like they would their own kids, right? Because I think so many of us, if we really kind of pull out and I would actually offer this as maybe a thought experiment for people to do, like pay attention for a few days to the dialogue in your head and think about if like you heard a kid being talked to in that way, like, would you be okay with that? right? Like another kid. And you probably will think to yourself, no, like I'm really, really intense. Like I'm really hard on myself. And then the follow-up question is like, is it working? And do you have practices in place to take care of that little kid who just wants to go and play and and reach like their potential? Because the criticism doesn't necessarily hurt. Awareness is different from criticism. The Monk Manual really will, I think, help you with awareness and honesty, but it's not the same as criticism. And I think over time it actually helps to root some of that out.
I absolutely 100% agree. Oh my gosh, to go through the dialogue in our head of how we talk to ourselves. Yeah, we should really reframe that for sure. Um, yeah, and the other thing is I love writing. Okay, so writing is kind of a lost art. Blog posts are fine, feed posts are fine, but I think we're losing dexterity. And to sit down and write with a pen or a pencil, I've had people tell me, oh, my hand starts cramping or I'm hurting because all we're doing is swiping and tapping, you know? And so I love the fact that you have this hardbound book that you're writing things down in, that then later you don't have to like go back in the computer and search keywords. You actually can look in a book and see that prayer was answered, or that habit, I'm still doing that. And it's a year later. Like I have improved. I might not think I have because that negative self-talk is telling me I'm the same person, but no, I have improved. And I will just say for myself, it makes organizing, you know, healthy eating well. So it does affect the physical. It helps me write down, you know, what workout do I want to do tomorrow? So you can use the dot journaling section. You can write little notes on the side. You can make it your own. You can day plan, but you can thought plan. And I love that because then all of the marriage of finding the balance of a good, you know, yeah, we got to work, or yeah, we got to take care of things and get errands done and stuff. But we also got to take care of ourselves and do that self-nourishment, because only then will we talk nicer to our family. Only then will we sleep better at night. Only then will we make healthier choices with our food, because we've written it out. We're going to stick to it if we've written it down usually. So I love that you can make something so simple but so effective. So I really can't say enough about how much I value it if you can't tell. But so before we wrap up, one thing you mentioned to me in an email was this is one tool out of several tools designed to be a peaceful journey. What do you mean by that? Do you have more tools coming in the Monk Manual website, or there's another thing we can look forward to?
Yeah, so there's a few things right now that we offer. One, we do have these kind of extension books for the Monk Manual that help you to set some quarterly goals, and then also just to manage a calendar a bit in a more robust way. So we do have that available, and then there's other things that kind of just basic notebooks for journaling and things like that of that nature. But yeah, the plan is right now the majority of my time is being spent on product development, and we plan to be rolling out a few other things in 2021, and then definitely in 2022. The thing is it's really slow for me. So the Monk Manual was really, it was like a fruit of my entire life. I mean, it was like one of those things where everything kind of comes together and it's like, okay, I got to go do this. But it also, like, the active development of it was very long because I want to be really intentional. So the things that we're working on, they take a bit of time because it's not just, I don't know, there's a lot that goes into it. But I will say that what we're really focused on is this space of a holistic approach to productivity, right? Of being and doing, and ultimately of helping people to live fuller lives. Because I think we all want to be able to experience a certain level of fullness, like both in the present moment as well as when we look back on our life. So that's what we're focused on.
I love it. I look forward to seeing what's coming next. So if you guys want to get one, Monk Manual has been very generous to offer us a promo code for my listeners. It's Jodelle, my name, Jodelle, and that's 10% off your very own. And this would make a great gift for people in your life who you know are stressed, anxious, they're having body issues, they're having, you know, disorder and chaos in their lives. Maybe just hit them up with one of these and go, here, try this for a little bit. So, but otherwise, where can people learn more about you, Stephen, or connect with you or find more about the Monk Manual?
Yeah, so monkmanual.com is a great place to learn a little bit about our vision, mission. Check out the Monk Manual. On Instagram, we're at Monk Manual. we've got a YouTube as well, Facebook. I don't have too much personally out there. I probably will do more in the future, but I've kind of been more of the behind the scenes guy in large part. But yeah, a good place to start would be whatever the platforms are that you like to engage on. We probably have a page of sorts, so you can hop on there and check us out.
Awesome. Well, I'll have those down in the show notes. And this has been amazing. I love these organic conversations, and you're inspiring, and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This has been great.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Bye for now. We spend a lot of time in our life these days on Zoom or on FaceTime or on a computer. And you really have to dial in that blue light exposure if you find that you are someone who is chronically on a device. And that's why I recommend the daylight blockers from Swanwick Sleep. I use them in many of my podcasts, and I use them anytime I'm on a Zoom that's kind of in the midst of the day when it's really bright outside already and my screen is bright. I only want so much blue light during the day, and mostly I get that from the sun. I don't want any extra from my computer. So if you really want to dial in your sleep at night, get your circadian rhythm and your blue light exposure in the day dialed in. Then after the sun goes down, if you're still on Zoom, which you got to go outside at some point and get some grounding if you're on that device so much, but get their nighttime blockers so that at least if you're on that Zoom call after the sun goes down, you can still release melatonin and sleep well. So if that's you, if you're looking for those kind of products to help dial in that circadian rhythm, dial in your sleep at night, wake up refreshed so you can do those Zoom meetings all over again, make sure you visit swanwicksleep.com and use my code JODEL10 and enter that for 10% off your pair of day blockers or nighttime blue blockers.